Good afternoon, Crime Crunchies. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Courtney C. I am your host and a 27-year veteran of the media. I am so excited about today's episode because we're going a little bit different. I love conspiracies. Any conspiracy, I'll take it. Today, we're going to be looking at the UFO connection of 12 scientists that in the last 2 years have either gone missing or have passed away. And some mysterious, some not. But I need to know more, and I'm going to dive in right now. So while I'm adding my screen, please remember to like, subscribe, share, doodly do. All right, so I'm sharing my screen right now. We are going to first talk about what I think is potentially one of the main threads in the conspiracy behind the 12 scientists that are either missing or have passed away. And it really links to what we think is a UFO disclosure movement, especially General McCaslin, who literally walked out of his home a couple months ago, left everything there, and literally disappeared. And he specifically had ties to the UFO disclosure movement. And that's kind of what started this whole ball rolling, was this major general that has had top secret clearance and has ties to the UFO disclosure movement. And then all of a sudden he goes missing, walks out his door, and never comes back. So let's just dive in to what is the modern UFO disclosure movement. And I love little presentations. So I've got some bullet points we're going to review, and then we're going to take a look at some news stories because the churn is churning on this for sure. So the modern UFO disclosure movement is a mix of government transparency efforts, military eyewitness reports, scientific investigation, advocacy from insiders and civilians. And it's centered around what I guess they're calling UAPs now, unidentified aerial phenomena instead of UFOs. And there has been talk about UFOs for years in modern age, really from 1930s on. And I believe they're out there. I don't see how it's possible that Earth is the only planet that has any intelligent life forms. I don't think they look like us, but I think that they're definitely far more advanced. And even just watching some of these whistleblowers, they're saying that there are UFOs, spacecraft, that we actually are reverse engineering to see how it is that they're able to bend time and space, anti-gravity. And there's at least one ship that apparently was actually dug up from archaeologists. So these UAPs could have been around for thousands and thousands of years. The Earth is billions of years old. I truly believe that there are civilizations that have happened and expanded, gone away, etc., a number of times. So let's continue with our bullet points. The key idea behind the modern UFO disclosure movement is governments know more about unexplained aerial objects than they've publicly shared, and some people want that information released. So how it shifted from fringe to mainstream. For decades, UFOs lived in the cultural attic. Then a few things cracked the ceiling. Military encounters became public, like, the ones that the navies have released. I think that they're slowly trickling information out, because if they just went splat with all this information, people could probably really freak out. And I think that they want to avoid that. So I think that they're slowly trickling information out. Pilots began reporting objects that outperformed known aircraft, showed no visible propulsion, moved in ways that defy current physics and understanding. The most famous cases came from U.S. Navy aviators, like the Tic Tac. The Pentagon acknowledged programs. The U.S. Department of Defense confirmed it had studied UAP through programs like Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, later efforts that involved in today's reporting systems, but we've heard of the Manhattan Project, Project Blue Book, things like that. This was a turning point, not proof of aliens, but proof the topic wasn't being ignored. Congress got involved, and this is just in the last few years, and I love this. I think that we need to have more Transparency, personally. Lawmakers began holding hearings and demanding reports through All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO. These reports openly admit some UAP remain unexplained. There are potential national security concerns. So who's involved? And it's not one group. It's more like overlapping circles. So we've got government and military officials. We've got some names here. David Fravor, a Navy pilot who encountered the famous Tic Tac object in 2004. Ryan Graves reported frequent UAP sightings off the U.S. East Coast. And David Grush claimed the U.S. had recovered non-human craft. These claims remain unverified and highly disputed, but I don't know. I mean, he's got certain clearance to do certain things, and I've watched several interviews with David Grush, and honestly, his story is very consistent. Bob Lazar, his story has remained very, very consistent. So again, I'm all about it. These voices shifted UFOs from tabloid weird to national security discussion. Scientists and researchers, a newer part of the movement, is trying to bring rigor into the chaos. Avi Loeb runs the Galileo project to scientifically study anomalous objects. NASA has also conducted independent studies into UAP behavior, and their goal has been to replace speculation with data. Civilian advocates and cultural drivers. This is where things get interesting. Tom DeLonge, this is a rock musician, and he's tied to, I believe, General McCaslin in this discovery project. Tom DeLonge, the rock musician, he co-founded To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. He helped connect former government insiders with public-facing efforts. The group blurred lines between entertainment, research, and disclosure advocacy. Former government and intelligence insiders claim deeper knowledge of classified programs. This includes people connected to defense intelligence, aerospace research, black budget programs. And then one name that often gets pulled into this orbit is William Neal McCaslin, General McCaslin. So what are they actually trying to disclose? Unknown objects exist. Some outperform known tech. Data is incomplete. And I'm hearing that they actually have biology bodies. Maybe they lived. I've heard that some of these UAP spacecraft were actual donations. And I've also heard that some of the UAPs that have appeared are really near nuclear sites, and that potentially there are beings out there that are trying to prevent us from going nuclear on each other. The three camps inside disclosure is the transparency advocates release everything the government knows. I'm kind of in that lane. Scientific skeptics, most of this will turn out to be misidentified tech or natural phenomena. I don't agree with that personally. Believers in non-human intelligence. This is evidence of extraterrestrial or non-human craft. So why it matters now, it isn't just about aliens, it touches bigger issues: airspace safety, national security, technological unknowns, and government transparency. The modern UFO disclosure movement is less like a grand reveal and more like a slow drip. A pilot report here, a declassified video there, a congressional hearing that raises more questions than answers with no smoking gun, no confirmed extraterrestrials, but also no complete explanations. So yes, very interesting. And I wanted to start off with a video. It's about 16 minutes long. We'll play it and see how it goes. But this is from Fox. And missing scientists, FBI is now probing 11 missing or dead nuclear scientists, but I've heard 12. And again, General McCaslin here is on the right, and he is the latest. I think he's really the catalyst into this, because this guy, he knows goods. And he, like I said, he walked out his front door. There's been people looking and searching for him, and he disappeared. Like Amy Hilliard in California, she walked out her door, was seen walking the dog or just down the street or at a park, and then just disappeared. So let's tune in, make sure that I have my sound. sure I've got it. I'm just going to remove this one for right now. Let me stop screen. I need to make sure I share it with the audio, and normally I'm pretty good about doing that. I'm going to do it again. All right, here we go. Let's take a look at this, and I've got several other videos and some articles, but we'll see how long this one plays.
National headlines right now. The Trump administration has directed federal agencies to investigate whether a series of deaths and disappearances among scientists with high-level security clearances are linked. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed the probe following reports that 11 individuals tied to sensitive military, nuclear, and aerospace research have been affected. A lot to discuss. So joining us next onto the program is Randy Sutton. He is a retired Las Vegas police lieutenant and also founder of the Wounded Blue. Randy, good morning.
Good morning.
So, Randy, we were talking a little bit behind the scenes here. This story, quite fascinating. A lot of people are focused on this. I need to hear your thoughts, though. 11 scientists working on high-level research with high-level clearance. What sticks out to you now that you know that the White House is launching an official probe?
This is a really interesting situation. I don't believe we've seen this quite literally ever before. What began as some internet chatter has now developed into a full-blown investigation by some of the largest federal agencies in the country. We're talking about the FBI will be taking the lead, as it should. But other agencies will be involved. Department of Defense, there will be the Department of Energy, any federal agency that has lost someone, or that someone has been connected to that has either been deceased. There are some that have been unsolved murders. Others have been tragic accidents that may or may not be accidents. And so they're going to be looking for any connection. And this is a big investigation. There's a lot of work to be done here, and will require a lot of resources. Now, without a shadow of a doubt, over the time period that we're talking about, people will die. That's the natural way of things, and we don't want to be paranoid here. But it is, as a law enforcement professional, we really don't believe in coincidences. So
Right.
this is something that needs to be looked at, and that means a fresh set of eyes on all these investigations.
Want to bring up a social media post courtesy of Fox News. It includes a map of the last known locations of all of those scientists. House Oversight Chair James Comer telling Fox also there's a high possibility that something sinister is taking place here. So, I mean, when we look at this map, and we're going to bring it up here full, Randy, and we see that this has taken place across the country, there's not really a central location here that would offer that, I
A
guess,
lot of
really
missing
secure
people.
link that is possibly what's being looked at here as we follow this investigation. What sticks out to you possibly from the dates, the locations?
Well, the randomness here is what really sticks out to me. And if you look at a large scale investigation, let's look at serial killers. How some serial killers literally have been able to go for decades without being discovered because of different locations. When you have different jurisdictions doing investigations, very often these investigations don't cross reference, because these agencies aren't talking to each other. And in a situation like this, where you have multiple agencies in multiple locations all over the country, to put a pattern together is really, really challenging. So this is going to be a very challenging investigation for the FBI and these other agencies.
When we also talk about the 11 scientists that we're discussing here, you mentioned something right off the top, which is that some of them are dead at this time, as some were killed. Others are missing. What's the purpose of linking missing
Which is
person
odd.
cases with also deceased cases? What are these initial, I guess, links that would have investigators say all of this needs to be looked at together instead of separately?
Well, okay, when you're talking about investigations of this nature, victimology is critical. That is, when I say victimology, that means that the investigators will have to go through the backgrounds of every single one of these. When I say go through the backgrounds, I don't mean do a cursory background check. I mean they have to dive deep into the past of all of these individuals and try to determine, is there a link between them? Did they all work on
Coworkers,
one project together?
friends,
What possible
what they work
a
on.
connection could there be to all of these men and
Correct.
women? And that's going to be a critical component to this investigation.
I mean, look how
We were
many in
just
New
showcasing
Mexico
there
alone.
some of the photos of those scientists that are coming here into question. We had mentioned that they have a high security clearance, Randy. What does that mean initially? And also, when someone is issued a high security clearance, for example, what kind of security measures are taken, if any, to try to protect such individuals that
Yeah, I'd be
know
nervous.
highly sensitive information?
Well, in reality, unless they are in really, really super secret stuff, there is nothing to provide security for them. Many of these people, remember, they were no longer employed. They're retired people. So
But
they
they
would no
still
longer be
know.
working actively,
They
and of
know.
course that throws another wrench into this investigation. Besides the geographical challenges. These are working for different agencies. I mean, it looks like what they really do have in common is their security clearances, but they need to look and see if there are any connections between one or more of these men and women, and then to a fresh set of eyes will have to go on every single one of them. Remember, an investigation has already taken place here on each of these individuals. By local agencies, some by federal agencies, but all of these men and women who have security clearances, that means that major background investigations were done on them to begin with,
But
and that
it
didn't
needs to be
preclude them from
centralized.
continuing their work in the context that they were. So all of these men and women had clearances, and so their backgrounds have already been done in order to obtain those clearances, and they're updated. So they're going to be looking at all of the backgrounds of these men and women.
The White House has promised a transparent investigation, with Press Secretary Levitt noting that, quote, no stone will be left unturned. And Randy, because there is so much interest in this case, it could be assumed that a lot of people are going to want answers and quickly. They're going to want to know each step of this. But realistically, with a case this large, how much would the public be able to learn as it continues? And also, what would investigators be willing to divulge to get the public's help, possibly?
Well, they're not going to be divulging a lot of information to begin with. I can tell you that right now, nor should they. Um, and as you said, this is a massive investigation. Look at the number of people involved. Look at the different locations. The resources that are going to have to be devoted to this are extremely challenging. They're going to have to choose which agencies are going to be playing the roles that they're going to be playing, which are going to be, leading the investigation. And then you have the politics of this as well. We have politicians involved, and they're going to request and maybe demand things be uncovered to the public that may be challenging for law enforcement to do. You can't conduct these investigations in a vacuum, but these investigators and the agencies have to weigh what the need is for the public need to know, and then balance that with keeping these investigations as secret as possible.
Federal agencies are involved in this investigation, but they're going to need that help and that cooperation with local agencies as well. Randy, can you walk us through how involved these local agencies are going to be,
I think
and which
probably a
steps
lot.
possibly they would take over,
They
and
already
really
have
how that entire
files.
process of coordinating with the FBI works?
Yeah, the coordination part is going to be the most challenging here. So each of these cases were probably investigated by local law enforcement first. When you look at for instance, the missing persons, that would be done by the local agency. But then other agencies may have been brought in as well. You look
Sure.
at the one of these some of these deaths were involving a plane crash, other auto accidents. Well, you're looking
FAA.
at a vast array of agencies that may have played a role in these investigations.
And
Now,
how well did they
the
investigate?
FBI will be taking the lead, and that's critical because the FBI has more resources when it comes down to the conducting large-scale investigations than any other agency. But
Yeah,
coordination with the local law enforcement who did the initial investigations is going to be critical. But when it comes down to packaging this up, it's going to be the FBI that will be taking the lead.
Another question really involving this is, the FBI, it investigates missing persons cases, also local agencies as well. Is there anything that is particularly different um, when we talk about people who are missing that, again, have that high security clearance, that really have a lot of sensitive information? Are these investigations treated differently than, let's say, a normal person
that's a
that
good
would go
question.
missing?
Yes, absolutely. Especially when you're looking at this began as some internet chatter, right? Um, and the theories, the conspiracy theories are multiple, and that's going to actually create some muddiness around the investigation because the investigators are going to have to look at try and peel away the fact from the fiction, because there will be a lot of there'll be a lot of internet detectives working on this and probably giving information. And believe me, even in smaller investigations, when the internet's involved, it can be very challenging to separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. But the local investigators that were participants in each of these separate investigations, all of the documentation, all of the investigative reports, all of the interviews with the investigators. This is a massive challenge, and there may be something to it, or unfortunately, the reality is that this may be a series of coincidences. And while that is going to be hard to swallow for a lot of people, they have to look at this, with a non-jaundiced eye, and try to determine what is the truth. And there may be some of these individuals. We have unsolved murders involved here. That's a good thing that there will be fresh eyes on these investigations, because those are the ones that, and the missing persons investigations are really, really challenging for all of these investigators.
Something that you mentioned is that this has started with online chatter. A lot of people at home trying to put the pieces together here because it is very interesting, this story, especially when you're talking about such a vast group of people that are dead or have gone missing, connected in some sort of
No
way, though. People are
coincidences.
most likely going to still dig in on their own, trying to connect these pieces. If they were to want to help investigators on this case, what would be your best advice to people that, may think they have a tip or some kind of lead to push this along?
Well, since the FBI is the major agency that's going to be doing these investigations, you would want to contact the FBI. There will probably be, in the not too distant future, a phone number that is
Yep.
being given out by investigators, that request anyone that has information to contact a specific number or a specific website that will try and move these the people that want to participate or believe they have information, to channel it through that. But I think that you're absolutely right when you say there's massive interest in this from all over, not just in the United States, but all over the world, because this is such a fascinating case.
Well, and America is not the only place that has UAP activity. There's UAP activity all over the world. So I've got a couple other videos that we want to watch, but I want to read this article from the BBC. Relative of 10 scientists who died or vanished grapple with impact of wild speculation. And please just note that some articles say 10, some say 11, some say 12. As time goes on, the number has changed. So this one is saying 10 scientists. I'm not sure if they're counting General McCaslin, but just know that we've got up to 12 scientists that are missing or have passed away in the last 3 years or so. So let's read this article together. Relatives of 10 scientists who died or vanished grapple with impact of wild speculation. And of course, we're going to have some folks who are not going to give in to speculation, but let's just read. So the disappearances and deaths of at least 10 people tied to sensitive U.S. research have drawn scrutiny from online sleuths and now federal investigators, but for grieving relatives. All the wild speculation is disgusting, end quotes. Carl Grillmeyer, who would laugh at the conspiracy theories about his killing, says his widow. I think it's absolute nonsense, says Louise Grillmeyer. I mean, there's the facts and they're out there. So I think what she's saying is there's the facts and they're out there, meaning that there's lots of theories about her husband. So she goes on, her 67-year-old husband was gunned down in their Llano, California home in February. That sounds odd. Grillmeyer's alleged killer, 29-year-old local man, Freddie Snyder, has been charged with murder and burglary and is due in court next week for his arraignment. Despite the arrest, Grillmeyer figures prominently in conspiracy theories about the deaths and disappearances of about 10 people with connections to top secret labs or scientific work. They are often lumped together as missing scientists, but the list includes an administrative assistant, an Air Force general, an engineer, and a custodian, and spans several fields from researching exoplanets to pharmaceuticals. Online sleuths have suggested the cases may be connected, and speculation has been growing for some time, with at least one case going back to 2022. Interest in the so-called missing scientists has reached such a fever pitch that the U.S. House of Representatives Oversight Committee and the FBI are announcing investigations into the cases. President Donald Trump even weighed in, calling their disappearances and deaths pretty serious stuff. This has only further stoked speculation. But family members say that there are established explanations for the loss of their loved ones and have tried to quell the hysteria. Grillmeyer's wife believes her husband was targeted in a misguided revenge plot. Months before the killing, a man had wandered on their property with a rifle, claiming to be coyote hunting. She says her husband directed the suspect to a nearby ridge. The man had also been causing mischief at other homes nearby, she says, and one resident called 911. Grillmeyer hadn't placed the call, but his wife believes the man blamed her husband for it as his behavior was escalating. The man came back with a baseball bat 2 weeks before Grillmeyer was killed, but left without causing any more trouble that day, she said. Then he returned on 16 February and allegedly fatally shot Grillmeyer, a renowned astronomer at the California Institute of Technology's IPAC Science and Data Center for Astronomy and Planetary Science. Quote, "We believe he came for revenge, thinking Carl was the one that called 911, says Louise. She said her late husband was probably the nicest guy that walked the face of the earth. Skeptics have poured cold water on the wild theories surrounding the deaths. The U.S. top secret cleared aerospace and nuclear workforce is 700,000 people. Science writer, investigator, and pseudoscience debunker Mick West wrote on April 16th on his Substack. Ordinary mortality over 22 months predicts 4,000 deaths, 70 homicides, and 180 self-unalivings. The list has 10. The deaths are real. The family's grief is real. The pattern is not. Louise Grillmeyer similarly says that while her husband would laugh at speculation that the deaths might be connected, he would also probably talk statistically to squelch conspiracies. The wife of retired Air Force General William Neal McCasland, the highest ranking and highest profile of the missing, took to Facebook the week after his February 27th disappearance from their New Mexico home to dispel some of the misinformation circulating. Even her 911 call 3 hours after she returned home from a doctor's appointment to find her husband gone, Susan McCaslin Wilkerson said she had some indication that he must have planned not to be found. She told the dispatcher that he turned off his phone and left it behind, but took his gun, though he doesn't generally carry a weapon. She also noted that her husband had recently been suffering from anxiety, short term memory loss, and lack of sleep. And he'd been saying if his brain and body keep deteriorating, he doesn't want to live like that. On Facebook 1 week later, she wrote, while McCaslin had access during his Air Force career to some highly classified programs and information, he had retired almost 13 years ago and has had only very commonly held clearances since. It seems quite unlikely that he was taken to extract very dated secrets from him. She also acknowledged that McCaslin had acted as an unpaid consultant for Blink 182 frontman Tom DeLonge's To the Stars organization as it sought to investigate UFOs and other matters. But her husband does not have any special knowledge about the ET bodies and debris from the Roswell crash stored at Wright-Patt, Susan wrote. She was referring to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, which UFO lore speculates might be the final resting place of extraterrestrial remains from unusual debris found by a rancher in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. I think it's dryly addressing the conspiracy theories. Susan wrote, at this point, with absolutely no sign of him, maybe the best hypothesis is that aliens beamed him up to the mothership. I think she's being sarcastic. However, no sightings of a mothership hovering above the Sandia Mountains have been reported. 8 months before McCaslin's disappearance, also New Mexico, but 135 miles away in Taos, an administrative assistant at Los Alamos National Laboratory, vanished. The family of Melissa Cassius also addressed the case on Facebook, again indicating that their loved one left deliberately. Their comments did little to dampen theorists' obsession with her case. Quote, it's been the hardest 6 weeks of our life without you, her husband Mark Cassius wrote on Facebook in August 2025. Sierra and I are starting to worry more every day without you. We believe you are okay, but can't understand why you haven't reached out. Other cases like Grillmare's had cut and dried explanations. MIT physicist Nuno Lorio was murdered by a former classmate who also was arrested for additional killings at Brown University, and the suspect confessed on video recordings later discovered by authorities. Another researcher vanished from his home 1 month after losing both parents within hours of each other, his father suffering a fatal heart attack in his arms right after his mother's death. His body was later found in a lake, and his wife told U.S. media how bereft her husband and only child had been following his parents' death. Another scientist died of arteriosclerotic cardiovascular disease at the age of 59, according to a 2023 coroner's report. Louise Grillmare says the explanations appear to be no deterrent for conspiracy theorists. She's even been contacted by many of them asking her opinion. Quote, I said, well, I can do better than an opinion. She says, I have the facts. The speculation, she says, is denigrating to their memories. Other loved ones reached by the BBC called the speculation terrible and disgusting, compounding families' grief, but chose not to speak on the record because they didn't want to give the stories any more airtime. For Louise Grillmare, who met her husband in an astrophysics class, she would prefer that the world know not just about his groundbreaking scientific work, but also his kind and generous character. He helped everyone that needed help, she says. For example, he got into 2 quite serious car accidents, and he didn't believe in suing. I mean, it was the other guy's fault, but he just wouldn't sue. His obituary remembered Grillmare as an avid pilot, flying small aircraft and gliders that he owned and maintained at his home. He would cheerfully accept requests to fly with him. Friends and associates recall that he loved the outdoors, driving tractors and doing repairs and other construction work on his house, where he also kept a small observatory with several telescopes. His wife adds that he had a very high standard of morals. He walked the talk. So that is very interesting. It sounds to me like most of these people are, of course, suffering with their loved ones being gone. and it's, it's real life. It's not just entertainment. It sounds like there are, reasons to not go totally crazy with, people who are missing and lost. I think it's just the connection that feels like it does have some legs. So let's go into this next video on News Nation. We've got U.S. adversaries may have taken out missing scientists. Let's take a look.
Whether the disappearances and deaths of at least 10 national security insiders with reported links to top nuclear secrets are connected, or whether, or even worse, whether they were all targeted. The House Oversight Committee is now investigating and today requested briefings with the Departments of War, Department of Energy, NASA, and the FBI. Committee Chairman James Comer and committee member Eric Burleson wrote that, quote, if the reports are accurate, these deaths and disappearances may represent a grave threat to U.S. national security and to U.S. personnel with access to scientific secrets. News Nation's been out front on this story since the very start. The cases are all very strange, and have a lot of similarities in common. They involve people who left their homes with no personal belongings and then simply disappeared. Some left home with a firearm before they vanished. Others were last seen on a highway or on a hike. At least 2 were killed in their homes. The highest profile person on the list is arguably retired Air Force Major General William McCasland. There's been speculation he oversaw a classified government UFO program. Last week, President Trump said the White House is looking into the reports, calling it, quote, pretty serious stuff. My next guest agrees. Congressman Eric Burleson was one of the first lawmakers to call for an investigation into these disappearances. He told me moments ago that something about this is not normal. Congressman, you say in this letter that this could potentially be a, quote, grave threat to United States national security and to U.S. personnel with access to scientific secrets. Explain what you're worried about.
Well, obviously, we know that there are programs in the past where foreign countries have used programs to try to encounter, engage, sometimes get the nation's top scientists to either stop what they're doing or come and work for that country. And so whether it was Operation Paperclip, or most recently you have China that's been doing Operation Fox Hunt, as well as Operation Skynet. These are disturbing, but it is true that foreign actors do engage. And our scientific community are very vulnerable targets.
Do you think that, this is not an extraordinary set of coincidences, that in fact they may be linked?
Right.
At least the missing ones,
fascinating about these individuals, they all were working in aerospace. They're working in whether it was in materials or propulsion. They were working with plasma research, all related to this topic. Well, that's fascinating. But what's really fascinating is the 4 individuals that stepped out of their home, left their phones behind, left their left their wallet, left everything behind, and just completely disappeared and never came back. That's not something that a normal person does. Yeah. And the fact that it happened within 1 year, 4 people walked out of their home, never to be seen again, all of which were working together on these projects for the Department of Defense. That's very mysterious.
How sensitive were the projects these 4 and others were working on?
Now, these are our top projects. You have Monica Reza was working on the materials that would be used for any kind of hypersonic missile in the United States. That is a critical national security issue. The others were working on advanced propulsion for our Air Force. So they were all read in at the highest security levels one could possibly imagine.
We know that in the past, for example, Israel has targeted Iranian nuclear scientists as a way to hurt Iran's nuclear program. What country do you think could or possibly be behind the disappearances of these top scientists?
I said China.
I would not be surprised if our adversaries, China, Russia, Iran, or any other adversary saw an opportunity to take out some of our nation's top scientists. I would not be shocked. It certainly is something that I would hope that our federal government is keenly aware of and trying to safeguard. But look, these scientists are not hardened. They don't have security detail. So they would be a very easy target. And that's something that has me worried for the rest of our nation's scientists. The other thing that concerns me is if there's nothing fishy here and these individuals just had mental breakdowns.
They need to check,
that tells you maybe there's something we should be doing to address the mental health of some of our scientists.
You've been a prominent voice in Congress calling for an investigation since these disappearances came to light. You wrote letters to the FBI, to NASA, and the Departments of Energy and War requesting briefings. Have you gotten a response from any of those departments?
Look, and here we'll continue on this, but this is very true. I mean, even the folks that have passed away or were killed, that's one thing. But these 4 or 5 that are missing right now, it does need to be investigated because there could be a link. People could be taking them out. What if they're being bribed? What if they're being paid? If there's a dollar amount and these people are, literally taking the bait, or, it's hard to say, but especially with the type of work that they're working on and with the disclosure that's happening. It could also be people who don't want the disclosure to happen. General McCaslin, he was part of the group that the Blink 182 musician was a part of, and I guess his wife says he was unpaid, but they were literally working on disclosure. So it could be somebody who's trying to stop what we're doing, somebody who's trying to steal secrets by kidnapping these people or bribing to lure them away, or it could be somebody who's wanting to stop disclosure. So it does need to be investigated. If there's something going on, even like you said, just mental health, they need to figure this out.
Not yet. We originally sent a letter related to a military intelligence officer that's not related to these scientists per se. But that is another common topic as well. So we've sent the letters for the scientists. We've also been sending letters for people that we know that were, maybe that they weren't a scientist, but they were working alongside these same programs and projects, but they were on the military intelligence side. So we have sent those letters as well. And we're hopeful now that the president is paying attention that we'll start to get some answers.
Yeah, the president said late last week that he was looking into this and had directed the White House to look into it. Have you been in touch with President Trump? Have you heard from the White House in any way?
I have not directly. Look, I'm the 435th most powerful member of Congress, so I am not exactly on their call list. But I would welcome a conversation with the White House anytime.
Finally, because I know you've done a lot of work on this issue as well, I spoke to journalist and UFO investigator Jeremy Corbell on Friday night, just moments after President Trump vowed to release the UFO files and these 46 videos. Do you have any information on when that will happen?
I don't know. The president says that it's imminent, so hopefully that's soon. I hope that he is really doing the diligent work of gathering this information. The intelligence community it's a hard nut to crack. I think that what we saw with the JFK files and those released is that he had to be pretty forceful in order to get some of those files away from the CIA, for example. It's my hope that the president is truly trying to not take no for an answer and is going to press hard to get these files, because I think there's a lot of information out there between the CIA and the Department of Energy. I think that's the first place that I would be demanding information from.
Yeah, Congress has been pushing hard for quite some time to get more access and to make public more of this information, because a huge amount of it has been kept under lock and key, very secret. That thing's
really weird. Look at how freaky that is. What is that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been very hard for us in the Oversight Committee to get anything. But I mean, we have a lot of people that come to us. Many of those videos, the 45 videos that were requested, I've seen. But because we have a lot of whistleblowers and people in the intelligence community that are coming to talk to members of Congress, because we can be read in at any classification level. And you've got some people working in the system that are doing their patriotic duty, which is why we're aware of these videos and that they do exist. But we want the American people to see these videos. The American people deserve to know.
What do you think their reaction will be once they see them, having seen them yourself?
I think that we have a lot of footage that's similar to the gimbal video. We have footage that's similar to the Go Fast. There's some that are in pretty good clarity. I've seen a metallic silver orb that's about the size of a beach ball in very, very clear imagery. And then you're seeing there's some videos of immediate acceleration of a flying object, and that's not something that you would. It just defies any normal propulsion or physics that we know of.
It sounds like the American public, in your opinion, will be pretty surprised to see these videos then.
You know, I don't know. I think that my main problem, and again, I'm ready to just dive into anything, but my main problem with the videos that we have out there thus far is that there's never any clear video. It's always kind of grainy. It's black and white. It just seems odd. It just seems odd that there's never really clear. So, and maybe they're not sharing the clear ones. I don't know. And I think that I feel like that there are people out there, or not people, but UFOs. I think that they're real. And I think that they have, bio bodies and everything like that. And it's easy to say now, not being 100% clued in, but how would I actually feel if it got confirmed and we actually started seeing them clearly in color, live? We look out the window and we see them in the sky. That actually might be a little bit more, it actually might be a little bit more scary, I suppose. So, here is this is a really long, I'm going to hang on to this article. Let's watch. This one looks interesting and it's shorter. So let's just watch this video with Cuomo and let's talk about some of the details he highlights.
This week, the FBI announced that it is now investigating a string of mysterious deaths and disappearances involving top U.S. scientists over the past several years. Some had reported ties to the UAP community, the UFO community. Today, and now look, I've covered this with Ross Coulthart, and I've been doing a lot of reporting on it where I've been reading into it, and I haven't really attacked it because I think it's more correlation and interesting for social media, but not really true causation. But today, we got thrown a curveball. Amy Eskridge is one of those who is dead. We know what happened to her. She's dead. We don't know how she died. It was ruled a suicide, but this happened back in 2022. She'd been working on anti-gravity technology, allegedly sent alarming text messages to a friend just a month before her suicide. These were the kinds of messages. If you see any report that I killed myself, I didn't. If you see any report that I overdosed, I didn't. She continued, if you see any reports that I shot anybody, I didn't. Now, you could say, okay, maybe she was struggling. These are pictures of her hands. She said that she had been hit with some kind of weird energy ray device, and her hands were red. Her window had weird marks on it. News Nation has been digging on this. We talked to the person who says that he got sent these texts, and he is a former intelligence official. But her father and her family says sometimes scientists just die. They kill themselves like our daughter did. They don't believe it was suspicious. Given her claims of harassment and those texts, is that why the FBI is looking into it?
I would.
Let's ask former FBI special agent in charge of the Tucson office, Andrew Black. This is a weird one. And now, look, some of them, I get why someone with your sophistication will say, this is tantalizing journalistically, but not forensically, not investigatively. But this is weird, these messages right before it happens.
I agree.
Yeah, Chris, you're right. This is something you'd expect to see in a Hollywood movie or in a novel. You know, and take into account the type of work that Amy was involved in, anti-gravity technology.
Yeah.
The stakes are very high as to national security purposes on what she was working on. The fact that her parents may feel that she did commit suicide doesn't mean the other things she reported weren't true. And maybe these things contributed to her taking her life. We don't know. And that's why it's great the FBI is investigating this at this point. But she was very specific that she felt she was being followed,
Wow.
stalked. She had evidence that someone had broken into her residence and gone through her personal belongings. And she told friends that she feared for her life. Oddly is this allegation that she was a victim of directed weapon energy. That's a rare thing, but also just adds more intrigue to the story.
That is so weird.
How capable are the investigators to tell the difference between a suicide and being shot?
You know, there are forensic techniques that the coroner's office can draw on, the FBI can draw on. The FBI is partnered here with the Department of Energy, NASA, and the Department of Defense. They're going to sift through all this. They're going to talk to people who were closest to Amy on this to kind of form a picture of her mental state and what she was going through. They'll probably can do some analysis of the photo you're showing right now of the burns on her hands.
Yeah.
That is an indication of a microwave pulse.
Wow.
It could be, but they are capable of getting a lot of information post-mortem through an autopsy.
Andrew Black, I appreciate you. Thank you very much. This is a weird one. You know, sometimes when you're covering these kinds of investigations, you like to be a half a step ahead and suggestive of a narrative that will make more sense as we learn more. I can't do that here. I don't know what to make of this. Andrew, be well. We'll keep talking about it.
Thanks, Chris.
We'll be right back.
So I agree. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have people looking into this. And the fact that anybody who texts that, you know, a month before, if you hear that I've done this or this does this, I'm not doing this. No, I think it definitely needs to be looked into. And I don't know. Let's watch this video. This will be the last one.
All right. There's 10 or 11 American scientists. They're all missing. They all had ties to UFO research. That's what you've been hearing, right? It's not true. Some of them, we know how they died. It's not a mystery. Some did have connections to UAP research, but not all of them. So let's separate fact from fugazi here with News Nation investigative journalist Ross Coulthart. It's good to have you, Ross. Thank you very much. And thank you for how discerning you've been on this. What is right? What is wrong?
I think, g'day, Chris. Firstly, I think it's a case of overreach. I think the whole story started in February the 27th when Major General Neil McCasland retired, disappeared from Albuquerque. And it was pointed out that whilst his disappearance is still unsolved, there was a colleague that he briefly worked with, Monica Razor, who was involved in the development of a rocket engine alloy called Mondelloy, and she disappeared in very curious circumstances in the Angeles Hills. Frankly, that's about the only connection that I can see in any of these cases that convincingly links back to General McCasland. The rest of the cases, some of them, frankly, are simple, in some cases, suicides or murders. Sadly, people do die. And it's been a long, simple fact of history that one of the things that media love is clusters and conspiracies. And I think in this case, what we're seeing is a pulling together of disparate cases where people have died or disappeared in circumstances that are often quite mundane and explainable. And I think it's being talked up in a way that I think is a big red herring. In and of itself, the disappearance of both Monica Razor and General Neil McCasland should be a national security concern. And it's good to see the FBI, less good to see the Department of Energy, frankly, investigating this issue. I think that the White House is to be applauded for taking it seriously, but I do question the idea that there is any link at all between the 10 or 11 individuals that we're talking about.
Yeah, and Ross, it was really important to me to have you on this because a lot of the reporting that we do on UAPs and the need for transparency is often swept up with exactly what you're calling out right now, where people take a point of curiosity and make it a conclusion, or they take correlation and they make it causation, and we get blamed for that. And I thought it was really important that people see you're the first one to jump on something that doesn't make sense. And that I think it actually emboldens us to keep pushing for transparency about what we do know makes sense, which is there's a lot more about the universe of discovery behind UAPs than the government has wanted to tell us. And I know the president once again told them to release files. It's the third time he told them to release the same files, and it hasn't happened. Last word to you.
Well, frankly, I think we're all waiting to see whether the president's going to follow up with an executive order that puts his promise into law, Chris, because at the moment it's all jaw, and there's a lot of war going on in the Middle East. Let's see if the president follows up with actually doing something about his promise. We would like to see what the government does know about UAPs. And frankly, I think this whole conspiracy theory about 10 or 11 so-called scientists or military officials is a big red herring.
Well, and again, possibly, absolutely, and there are some things like there's a custodian that may not make sense because while he might have some top secret clearance just to even be there, obviously he's going to see or hear. I think that it's definitely worth looking into and just getting it done, doing due diligence, and finding out if there is a problem. Because if folks are being compromised from a foreign entity, they need to know. I mean, it can't hurt, right? And if there's no link, then there's no link. But if there is, then they need to figure that out. If there's a mental health issue, they need to figure that out. So well, that is it for me covering this. I'm going to continue watching and seeing what develops from the FBI investigation, but I thank you so much for joining me again today, and I look forward to you joining me for more live content. Till then, please make sure that you do subscribe and like, share, comment. I am going to be doing a t-shirt giveaway in the month of May. I'm really excited. I'm putting it together right now. So there'll be more information on that because I want to thank folks who do come to my lives. But until then, I will catch you on the flip side.